Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining also this third time. Before going into the core of the presentation, I would like to just briefly show this very beautiful woodblock print uh, that depicts the narration of a wondrous mandala, which of course Nietzsche never inscribed, but it was during the Edo period. This legend was created, and it wasn't so popular at that time as it became extremely popular in the 19th century in the 19th century when the black ships the Americans basically are docked at Edo Bay, and people got really scared for the first time. The foreigners were coming to Japan, and de facto ending the Tokugawa period of 250 years of isolation. And this was a time where um, those two mandalas became very popular, and they become displayed again, and there were intense chanting sessions at Saikyoji in Oshiage in Tokyo, and at Kuonji, of course, where the other mandala was. And of course there were also kaicho and dekaicho sessions. That dekaicho means basically sort of the business trip of a relic, and so when they bring a certain relic to another temple in town, for example, to make it a special ceremony. They were really intense chanting sessions. So I wanted to start this seminar about identity, but by showing this ukiyo-e print, which is not the only one. Several of those prints were created, and even several of reproductions at that time of this mandala. So basically woodblock printed scrolls, polychrome and monochrome in many versions, and through the several abbots of Kuonji, which either signed it directly, or they created a special red stamps, because they were printed in large quantity. Even I have two or three of those mandalas, which means basically that they have survived until this day, basically. So it's even hard to imagine how many have been printed. So this as a short forward, let's go into the core of the presentation. And next slide, please. So as last time, I begin with a summary of what we are going to talk today. So I will recap the last session, and then I will talk about the post Nichiren. So after Nichiren's passing, what happened as a natural process. Then I will briefly touch into the Hokke identities in the calligraphic mandala. So basically, many successors of Nietzsche through the centuries, they did not simply made a copy, a carbon copy, so to speak, of Nietzsche's mandala, but they interpreted what was their understanding of Nietzsche's teaching. And then we will also see that particular identities of certain groups are reflected on the mandala. And then I will briefly talk about the Pax Tokugawana, which is basically, many of you know, Pax Romana is a term to describe during the Roman Empire. There was this peace, but you were at peace as long as you do it the Romans wanted you to do. So it's a sort of a euphemism. So there is a writer who wrote about this, the Edo period, and he he created this term Pax Tokugawana, which I borrowed from him. This divide in impera means basically divide and conquer, which is basically what the Tokugawa dynasty did through these 250 years. Then I will briefly also touch in the society and history reflected on the mandala, just on two brief examples, just to make a point. Then I will speak about superstition, ruin, and revitalization. Many of you know probably that there was a period where Buddhism in Japan was on the verge of extinction, and it was born again, so to speak, from its ashes in a certain way, and then I will briefly touch on a uniqueness that transcends. And then can we go please to the next slide? So last time we talked about what it means to think visually in the sense of symmetry and chiaroscuro and left and right. So basically, what our brain sees beyond what sees the eyes. There, in the arts, in design, in whatever we see, there are certain factors that causes us a natural, an innate reaction, and I have touched on my studies how Nichiren most probably consciously inscribed his mandala in order to create a certain reaction in the viewer. Then we briefly touch on the Buddha's voice, how Nietzsche, we know that the Buddha's voice is one of the 32 characteristics of the Buddha, and Nietzsche insisted on a honzon, a focus of devotion that should be also bearing this characteristic, and how Nietzsche was able to solve in a certain way this problem of having an inanimate object to have a voice. Then I touch on the eternal return, which is the other way. And then I show typologies of the mandalas and evolutioning expressions, and then I explain the concept of eternal return, which is basically a concept that the historian Mircea Eliade coined in the last century, that basically through ritual you are anyone is able to return to a mythological or to a historical event through ritual. This is basically what happens every time, for example, you chant the Lotus Sutra collectively or alone. Then we also touch on the fact that Nichiren was not alone when he inscribed this mandala. I use the term collective performance, but Reverend McCormick, of course, corrected me, but because it's not a performance, but is rather a ritual. And then we showed about undeletable traces of this producing of the mandala, so fingerprints of Nichiren or smudges and stains, everything is still on there. And then again, the history reflected the history at that time on Nichiren's mandalas and on other mandalas, and then we close with transmission and identity. And next slide, please. And now I would like to briefly touch on the post-Nichiren. I purportedly placed this second subscript about a natural process, because I think everyone here knows that even in the 21st century, there's some of sectarian debate, some is more debating, someone is less debating, but there is a certain debate going on, actually without any reason. But how these differences between a large Sangha, which should be actually one without any distinctions, has created. One point is that all the original temples that are now the head temples, like Ikigami Honmonji, like Nakayama Hokkekyoji, etc., etc., they were all family temples. So even the, I guess every one of you knows the Taisikiji temple. That was the family temple of the Nanjo family. The Hondoji temple in Chiba, a very important temple, was the family temple of a family. So Myosenji Temple in Sado was the family temple the Endo family temple to which Abu Subo belonged, etc., etc., etc. So after a certain period, let's say that third, fourth generation, then those family temples became proper temples because the abbot, the priest studied at Enyakuji, that there were proper study seminars. So those temples became actually more powerful and could count on the support of wealthy patrons. And then in the process that I will explain later in the what I call the Pax Tokugawana, but I just briefly mention it, that in a situation where the shogunate willingly tries to put everyone's against each other, it becomes obvious that people concentrate more on doctrinal debate rather than concentrating on something more creative and more powerful. So all those centers of power in a certain way became more adversarial in a certain way. But this is actually a natural process, as we know from any other religion, from including inside of Buddhism, any different stream or school of Buddhism, be it Shingon or Pure Land or Zen. Everybody has, every of those has his subsects and divisions and debate, which is something that is actually not advisable, and this is the reason why, in a certain way, which is halting or preventing Buddhism to spread more or to be more accepted among people. And then we go to the next slide, please. So after this brief premise, we go to the core of this presentation. So here you see 5 mandalas. They are all the same, but they're also all different. Of course, different is the calligraphy. Different is the iconography, in the sense that how certain figures are placed, on how much importance are given to them. We have last time we have discussed about the komyo sense, so these rays of light. So we see in some of those mandalas, they are more accentuated. In other, they are almost absent. You see mandalas that are many figures are depicted on the mandala. Other are more have a lot of empty spaces. So this is the graphic aspect, but there's also the aspect of what the mandala represents. So on the first mandala on the left, this is a mandala of the fourth abbot of Kuonji, Nichiren. So fourth means, of course, Nichiren is the first and Nikko is the second. So the fourth will be actually the real second. I show this because, unfortunately, of his predecessor, there are no extant mandalas that we are certain of. So this is basically the oldest mandala, extant mandala, that we have in the Kuonji tradition. So you see here, Nichiren depicts the same figures. He leaves a lot of empty spaces. It is a very, we can imagine that he has a very, how can I say, rational personality, or perhaps he intended to depict the mandala as a cathedral with a seen from above as a with a set of statues, as Nico had done, had inscribed one mandala, which is very similar. But what I wanted to draw your attention on is, for example, that at the bottom he placed Nichiren with Namu Hommon Daishi Nichiren Shonin. So every possible honorable appellative he attributed to Nichiren, of course, and then he puts his signature on the left side, leaving many empty spaces. On the second mandala, going towards the right, this is a mandala from an abbot named Nichigen. It's the 11th abbot of Ikigami Homonji. Of course, when we say 11th, we have to take out 2, so it's the 9th. But apart from the very evident creative force behind the inscription of this mandala, with his komyo lines, etc., we see another interesting thing is that at the center, Nichigen places Namu Nichiren Daishonin, and then on the side he places Nichiro, and then also Nichizan and all the other abbots, not all the other abbots, but the first 4 abbots in this lineage. So we see here that those preceding abbots are placed within this transformation panel with the as if they were present at the assembly of the air. But basically, on top of any possible religious significance is an identitarian significance, because the preceding mandalas in the Ikigami lineage, they're all placed on the mandala. If you see all the early mandalas of those abbots, you see that each one keeps adding his predecessor on the scene, so to speak, on the transformation tableau, until I think the 12th of the 13th. So there are some of them which really, in a certain way, allow me to say the term, it's cramped down there in this area. So whoever sees those mandalas immediately know that this identity is immediately caught into this identitarian narrative. And then the third one in the middle, this is from Jogyo Inichio, a very important leader in the Nakayama Hokkaido tradition. He inspired many other successive generations of leaders to remonstrate with the emperor, with the shogunate. And he also created a narrative of the true Nichiren follower who goes to remonstrate with those in power, and without fearing any persecution, and on the opposite, actively seeking persecution. But what I want to draw your attention today is, if you can see under the classical mandala panel, you see that there is a line, and then there are what I'm not sure if you can distinguish this, but there's basically about 200 names of all the devotees that probably donated alms for the construction of a temple, or anyway, they were the whole Sangha, the whole Hokkaido Sangha at that time is present on the mandala. So everyone is inscribed, of course, not with their lay names such as Hiroshi Yamamoto or something like that, but of course with their religious, their name of being part of the Nichiren Sangha, so which is not always the rule, but often the fact that females have a name with starting with a myo, for example, like Myoho, and the males had a name starting with Nichi, such as Nichiren, and all those names are carved on this beautiful plank. So we have another type of identity. Not only the preceding abbots, so the leaders are placed on the mandala, but here Jogyo Inichi, on the contrary, he also placed all the lay people, all the lay supporters on this mandala. So this is creates their sort of identity. Then further to the right, this is a mandala from Shujin in Nichiryu, also a third or fourth generation disciple who Nichiryu was one of the first generation leaders, which of course neither met Nichiren nor anyone who knew him, or not anyone who knew somebody who knew him. So really totally disentangled with any possible direct connection to Nichiren. So he was one of the first, among others, who had to create a narrative of a direct spiritual transmission. But apart from this, Nichiryu, in his studies, he perceives that the core of the Lotus Sutra is in the 8 chapters, I think from the 15th to the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. This is why his school is also called the Happonha, the 8th chapter school. And as a matter of fact, you see that in his mandala, it's still a classic mandala, but it's different, because on top you see Shakyamuni and Tao. This is of course, and then in the second row you don't have all the 4 bodhisattvas. You have Jogyo, the leader of the bodhisattvas, and you have other bodhisattvas, other figures, which are according to the chapters of the Lotus Sutra, which he wanted to represent instead of the general, so to speak, scene that Nichiren wanted to depict. Then also you see the last mandala on the right. This is also a faction of Nichiryu's school in Kyoto, and you see one interesting thing is that if you look at the Kyo, so at the last character of the Daimoku, you see how creatively he inscribed this character Kyo, which is very evidently something that he wanted to show artistically in a way, but also to create an identity, because it's very similar. You remember we talked last time about the Nami Yuri Daimoku that was created by Higobo Nichizo, which is this upwards bent Daimoku, which was also became in a certain way a characteristic landmark of his Shijo faction or school. And Nichiren also wanted to create a certain identity mark with this very special kyo, which is not exactly the same as the Nami-Yori Daimoku of Nichizo. So it's bent upwards and on the side as well, so to speak. And this is not a coincidence, because we can see this in every mandalas that he inscribed, but also in his school, not necessarily every successor, but repeatedly. We see repeatedly this identitarian sign to make a point that this mandala is inscribed within the school of Nichiren, which is also a derivative of the 8th chapter school. So then we go to the next slide, please. So you see this. I chose this woodblock print, which has, of course, nothing to do neither with Buddhism nor with Nichiren. So to describe that, as most of you probably know, Japan was isolated for 250 years until under the Tokugawa regime or shogunate, or how you want to call it, and of course, yes, it was very peaceful in a way. Of course, that there were some internal strifes, but generally we can say that it was very peaceful because there was no foreign invasion. Nobody came from outside. Also, nobody could go outside, and nobody could come inside from outside. So you see here this bucolic scene of even ladies smoking, people flirting, and wherever you see, you see harmony in a way. This Tokugawa period, which is also, I mean, it's actually the proper name for Edo period, but most of the people call it Edo period. In this period, of course, art and beauty, so artisanship, craftsmanship, design, so in every field, human field, so those beautiful kimonos and paintings flourished immensely. And in the two cities of Edo, so Tokyo and Kyoto, a different class emerged from because the warrior class was still existing, of course, protecting the shogun and the emperor, but it was a different warring class than at the time of Nichiren, where perhaps a foreign invasion could be possible. So in this period, in Kyoto, the so-called Machishu Bunka, so assembly, a town assembly, in a way, not assembly in the sense of, in a political sense, in the sense of gathering, of people going together. And in Edo, the Edo Chojin, which is basically means more or less the same thing. In this period, the Nichiren schools, and all of them, the Nichiren temples, flourished immensely. So they became very, very powerful. And of course, this is when they start also this sectarian debates, such as the Fujufuse and all those famous debates, which created actually more harm than the perceived righteousness of orthodoxy. But this was also fueled by the very clever Tokugawa, because he prohibited priests to go to study or to contact basically with temples of other schools. So if you have no, how can I say, exchange with the outside, with other cultures, if you have less or almost no contact with other schools who has different ideas, what you can do, on one side, you unite against the perceived enemy, so to speak, or such as the Nichiren sects versus Jodo or Zen. But then also you start, because you are bent inwards, not all outwards, then you start exacerbating also sectarian debate within your own group. And this is basically what happened, on top of another fact, because the Tokugawa required a certificate of non-Christianity to be issued by temples. So basically, all the lay people, they had to bend in a way to the clergy's will in a certain way. Of course, we know there's people who have bad intention everywhere, in the government, in the laity, in the clergy, and the clergy, of course, is not an exception. But apart from this, you create the Tokugawa regime created this atmosphere where everybody had to be happy and harmonious, of course, because you had basically nowhere to go. It was a very, very large golden cage, to the point that it was the real matrix in a way, not technological, but in a practical way. So, because you couldn't go anywhere, and people had to work very hard, because the Japanese people are very smart and creative when it comes to find a solution. So basically, going to pilgrimage, not only, of course, in the Nichiren school, but in any other Buddhist school, going to pilgrimage was something that your daimyo, your boss, your samurai, chief samurai, couldn't prohibit you. So at least once a year, or maybe when there is a particular recurrence, such as in the we know in the Nichiren school, the Tatsunokuchi Ryuko Honan, Tatsunokuchi persecution, when Nichiren was born or when he passed away. There are more occasions in a year to say, okay, let's get together, and this was a very good occasion for even the simple people, for the farmers, to say, yes, I have to go to this ceremony, so please let me go a couple of days. And so this sort of religious tourism flourished. And the great thing is that this narrative became feeding to itself in a way. So I mentioned before this kaicho and the kaicho, so opening of the relics, or bringing the relics in on some other temple. So there was really a flourishing culture of festivals and producing art and making art, of course, including kabuki shows, kabuki dramas, narrating stories about Nichiren, fictitious or real, and chances for people getting together. And this created within this Machishu and Edo Chojin culture, this created enormous aggregations and helped the Nichiren school to grow immensely. If we think how Nichiren started it, basically as a sort of, let me say, outlaw, because of course he was banned to Sado, and also his followers were persecuted actively by the government. But now, a few centuries after, you see how the Nichiren followers were deeply embedded into the high strata of society. They could win the support of Oman no Kata, who was the concubine of Tokugawa Ieyasu. The Tokugawa shogunate himself was one of the great supporters to some of the Nichiren schools, not only exclusively, but for example, such in the case of Oman no Kata, she was exclusively devoted to the Nichiren school. So this, and of course, she created an enormous inflow of offerings from the government, to the point that the sectarian debate, which I mentioned before, created this Fujo Fuse movement. So we don't accept donations by non-believers. Which includes, of course, the Tokugawas, if some of the daimyos were not believers, which created another series of problems, which, for example, annihilated the Kansho Accord in the 15th century. I think Reverend Ryu McCormick has written about this. So this was the situation in the so-called Edo period or Tokugawa period. The next slide, please. So, title of this is History Reflected on the Mandala. Of course, I could have used tens of examples, but for obvious reasons, I just choose two for about what I wanted to say. You see here on the left this beautiful polychrome woodwork print mandala is the famous mandala for repelling the Mongols, re-edited, so to speak, in a more compact format, or in the size basically of a mandala as we have at home or in a small hall. So you see we have this colorful narrative, and then Onden Nichko signed on the bottom. He writes a few dedications. You have this rain causing dragons. You have the four heavenly kings protecting the country. The mandala inscribed within a circle, as to example to resemble the Japanese flag. But what I wanted to say is that when the black ships of Commodore Perry that we mentioned before arrived to Japan, really many of those mandalas were printed. Even Onden Nichiko, he had already passed away 2 centuries before, but his this narrative was revived, and many of those mandalas were printed. Unfortunately, because we don't have enough time to talk about this, because this Hata mandala, although it is not even closely related to Nichiren in the sense that he never inscribed this, and we know, of course, that this narrative of the emperor asking him to write a wondrous mandala to repel the Mongol is a later creation. But nevertheless, there is so much history behind this mandala, so much happens, and so many interesting things that would be worth to do just one hour of webinar on this one, but I have to pass for obvious reason. And next on the right, you see another beautiful mandala of the 36th abbot of Kuonji Nichiken. And the reason why I show you this, not any particular theological reason, but look at this kind of mosaic pattern, which is not only on this mandala, but if you see at the Nichiken Shonin Honzon Shu, there's also a Honzon Shu, so a Honzon collection of this abbot. They are basically all similar in this pattern, which you can see is a conscious pattern. Is not just that he ran out of space and had to clog all the characters inside. This is, and as we know, we have said repeatedly that the mandala has no, how can I say, preparatory draft drawing. It's just in the moment, so you inscribe what you feel in that moment, and this is what was Nichiren was feeling. So it reflects in a way the playful, in a way, atmosphere, the artistic and playful atmosphere of the Edo period. So even Nichiren wanted to capture the attention of the viewer, of the devotee, with creating this very artistic mandala. And I'm actually trying to buy one on an auction right now. They are very cherished, so I'm not sure if I can afford it. But apart from that, what I wanted to say is even now, there is a chance once in a while, maybe once in a month or every 2 months, a mandala of Nichiren is offered on the market. It means that he definitely had inscribed many of those mandalas. And now we go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned before about the clergy, not only in Nichiren's schools, of course, the whole Buddhist clergy at that time tried to, there were some of them that tried to take advantage of the position, because of course if the anyone was obliged to have an anti-Christianity certificate. Of course, there were maybe some small local temples. I don't really know how widespread this phenomena was, or in which school it was prevalent. Let's say, for the sake of being equal and fair, it was, of course, maybe cross every school. But apart from that, a very important thing that led at the point to the ruin is that, being so inward bent, the whole Buddhist clergy, with of course the Shinto clergy, they together they created a sort of superstition against everything. So there was a lot of exorcisms going on against water, evil spirits. So people lived in a certain way, in completely separated from reality, because of course, as we know very much, Japan had always a problem with Japan has a very strong nature in a sense. When I say nature, I intend with I mean earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and typhoons, and that sort of. So the nature shows when she is angry, in a way, and particularly Japan has plenty of those situations, as unfortunately we know very much. So this evil spirits against everything that possibly could harm you has always been very strong. Even today, I just came back from Kyoto. I was with a group. We went to see Nichiren Mandala, and they were in Japan for the first time, and they noticed that in Kyoto, but not only, but it's very more prominent in Kyoto, that outside some characteristic restaurants, there is a dish with some salt, and everybody asks me, what is this? And I say, this is against the devil, the devil in the sense, not the Christian devil with the horns, but devil in the sense that bad luck, everything that could happen to you. So you keep it outside. Even today in Japan, if you go to a funeral, cross any kind of religion, or a non-religious funeral, or non-denominational, all the participating guests, they receive a small gift, and inside of this package is a small envelope with some salt. Why is this? Because when you go back to, when the funeral is finished, you go back home, and in order not to bring bad luck and bad demons, or bad ghosts into your home, you spray a little bit of salt in front of your entrance, and only then you can go in. But this, everyone does this in Japan. So they are not even aware of those old superstitions from the Edo period. So this was the situation. And at a certain point during the Meiji Restoration, when Japan said, okay, now we want to become the same as the Western nations, we want to become, we want to have progress, we want to be modern, as those powerful nations such as America, England, Germany, etc., etc. So we have to get rid of all this superstition. Then there was this Haibutsu Kishaku, which literally means abolish Buddhism and destroy Shakyamuni. So you see on these three drawings and prints on top, you see that many Buddhist sutras were just burned, or even used as tiles on, or as roof tiles, as building materials. Statues of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, a lot, really treasures of art were destroyed and used as fuel and burned, and even the everything what you see it here in the third drawing on the right. Even every Buddha's images, the temples, bells, ornaments, everything was smelted down, to create cannons, ammunitions, or to produce railway rolling stock and this sort of stuff. This was really, really a very 1868 to 1884. Imagine that this is a lot of time. This is 16 years. 16 years is really a long time that all those things happen. As a matter of fact, there are some regions in Japan, I think it's Kagoshima, but I could be wrong. But anyway, around there in the Kyushu, where Buddhism has been completely eradicated. Of course, now not, but at the time there was not a single Buddhist temple in that area. But even famous temples, they were destroyed and burned down and really put down to the knees until something positive happened, of course, from the revitalization. Many thinkers, priests, and lay people contributed to the revitalization of Buddhism, of course, but for obvious reasons, I chose three figures which I wanted to introduce to you today. One is Inoue Enryo. He is, I think he was from the Jodo school, so he's not related to the Nichiren school. But because books about Western philosophy and other Western texts were being translated into Japanese, Inoue Enryo helped, with many others, of course, create a new form of Buddhism thanks to the philosophical influence of the West. And so Buddhism could, in a certain way, get rid of superstition and come back in a certain way to what Buddhism really is. As a matter of fact, on a on a funny note, we can say Inoue Enryo was very famous for his debunking of superstition and demons. So he was also, on a way, sort of a funny figure, we could say today, because he was kind of the doctor debunking or doctor enemy of ghosts. He has such a kind of a nickname which I don't remember right now. But thanks to this guy, which is happens to be from a completely different school than Nichiren, Buddhism in Japan could experience a new flourishing. Then in the middle, you see, some of you maybe know this gentleman. He's Honda Nisho. He was one of the advocates of socially engaged Buddhism. We know, of course, from history that the main Nichiren narrative was to convert the emperor or the shogun. That has been the main focus in the past, but Honda Nisho was one of the thinkers that advocated no, and now we live in a different era, so Buddhism needs to be socially engaged and to create a different message. Also, as Jacqueline Stone explained in a wonderful lecture, which is still available on YouTube, and I'm mirroring it on my channel, so you can see in the not where my videos are, but where the other videos are from other scholars. You see this very beautiful, very powerful lesson from Jackie Stone, where she speaks, of course, about Tanaka Chigaku and Honda Nisho and others. When shakubuku, so proselytizing, became possible and again, and how it was envisioned in the 19th and 20th century. Honda Nisho was basically one of the forefathers of, in a way, of all the lay movements, which I'm not naming individually, that still exist today, inspired about Nichiren. Then on the right, I would like to mention a figure which is, I think, in the West almost unknown. She was a nun, Murakumo Nichie. She was the last nun of imperial descent in a way. She was from a famous nunnery in Kyoto, which unfortunately is not active as a proper nunnery at that time. She was a very powerful woman who created the possibility of an active role of women in Buddhism as we wouldn't have seen it before. She created one of the first Nichiren prayer halls in Korea when it was part of Japan at the time. And she was also a great calligrapher. She made all the calligraphic titles for the Myoshu Sentetsu Honzon Kagami. Those who are familiar with the fifth volume of the Nichiren Buddhism knows what I'm speaking about. The Myoshu Sentetsu Honzon Kagami was the greatest mandala catalog before photography was has made possible create other catalogs. So it was a entirely woodblock carved catalog which with many mandalas are very even the letters, of course, each of them. This is very an historical achievement, even though I shall say that 80% of the mandalas depicted in this catalog are actually not actual Nichiren holographs, but nevertheless this is still historically a very important thing. So these three figures are just one of the many that Buddhists have to, and particularly Nichiren Buddhists has to thank that they even know that who is Nichiren today, because otherwise if it was for the zealots of the Meiji restoration, there will have been nothing. There will be no Nichiren mandalas, and nothing that we know today. So please give a positive thought in a sense to these three persons, just in representation of many others. And then we go to the conclusion. To the next slide, please. Here I just put randomly some of mandalas carved in stone, on wood, in different colors, on paper, and on stone, etc., etc. So I briefly mentioned about sectarian debates and harshly discussing about different groups on doctrinal issues. But we have one uniqueness that transcends everything, is that on everyone, in any way you want to depict or to show Nichiren's narrative or the Lotus Sutra, there's always Namo Myoho Renge Kyo in the middle. And this is unique to the Nichiren school, because we know that any other school has their own Buddha with his mudras and gesture and poses with their own unique narrative. But within the framework of the Nichiren group, if we can see it as a whole, the uniqueness that transcends is the Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. And let me just conclude by quoting the Chitta Sutra. The Chitta Sutra is a sutra. This is not a Buddhist teaching. The sutra means teaching in a broader way, and Chitta means act making. So the Chitta Sutta says, the depiction of harmony and beauty has a transforming influence upon the viewer. When we respond to beauty in that moment, we came out of ourselves. Our worldly cares and concerns are left behind. In that moment, we are absorbed in the grace, which is everything we were in creation. This is, of course, a paraphrasing of the original text is, of course, different than this. But if I can just add my personal message is that beauty will save us in a certain way, because beauty is not something ephemeral, which is sometimes considered, if we compare it to some very elaborate doctrinal exegesis or treaty. Beauty is something that anyone can understand immediately, can perceive immediately, and can be absorbed in the grace of everything that is in creation. So this, to conclude for these three classes or meetings or webinars, how you want to call it, it has always been about the beauty, in a certain way. We started with simple signs in the Neo-Paleolithic era, and we went to the Buddhist narrative, and we talked about the eternal return, about smudges and then fingerprints on the mandala. We talked about many things. So uh, uh, my aim in this is a very long presentation if we want to look at it all together. But the reason why I basically talked altogether more than 3 hours only basically about beauty, and in the hope to that you can see the mandala in with new eyes, and consider also your daily activities in this as a Nichiren Buddhist, or as someone who is interested in Nichiren or in Buddhism, or in Japan in a broader way, that there is also this different aspect which is able to touch some similar chord on everybody. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation today. Mezurashi in Japanese, I don't know how to say it in English. For once, exactly on time.
Great. Thank you so much, Luigi. It's a wonderful presentation. All three were great. Um, we do have a little time, about I think 15 minutes for questions before we have to bring things to a close. I have a couple to start with
Mhm.
that I received. One is, let me see if I can move the video back here, or the slides back. Oh, here. Um, Stephen Shushao was asking about the Nichiren mandala here. He noticed that there is no Aizen or Fudo present on it. And I wonder if you had any comment to make on that. And I guess generally, were there a lot of mandalas made that left out the Aizen and Fudo, which is curious because Nichiren Sino put so much importance on having them there.
Yeah, this is right. Frankly speaking, I don't have a clear answer on that. Also because this could one factor could be the trimming. If you can see even the Nichiren mandala, this is not the actual size of the paper on which Nichiren inscribed the mandala. It has certainly been trimmed. If this means also that the Fudo and Aizen have been trimmed out, I don't think that anyone is able to give you an answer. I mean, anyone who give you an answer, I will be very doubtful. This could be, of course, just educated guess, because, of course, the Sanskrit, the Siddham glyphs are remindful of the Shingon school, the esoteric school, and in this way, it could be that some of the abbot wanted to distance himself from the Shingon narrative, but also, or perhaps even as a specific request of the recipient of the mandala. But basically, I don't really have a clear answer on that.
Wow. I would be amazed if Nichiren's followers would leave out stuff that Nichiren himself felt was perfectly good to include.
For,
But
for example, yeah, for example, yeah.
yeah, that would be something. Let's see. Next question. I'm going to stop the sharing at this point. Here we go. Okay. Next question is from John Hughes. He sent these by email. One is recently he received an amulet from the temple atop Mount Shichimen, and it's the wooden piece appears to have a circular mandala gohanzon. Actually,
Mhm.
those are in your very first slide that you showed. There were
Mhm.
two
Yeah,
versions.
yeah.
So his
Mhm.
question is, were circular mandala gohanzons used in Nichiren's time, and if not, when did they develop? So that's the first question.
Clear cut answer, no. So during Nichiren's time, there were no mandalas inscribed in a circle. We don't know the exact time where they developed, well, but we can fairly see if we have catalogs such as the fourth volume of the Mandala book, or any other. I mean, you can search for yourself. You can see that this mandala inscribed in a circle, that will be the circle of the sun. That will be the Japanese flag. That will be that sort of narrative. This started to develop around at least at the 16th, but I would say even more 17th century is the time where those mandalas started to appear.
Mm, mm,
And Shichimen, of course, is a typical Edo figure. I mentioned before this great lady Oman no Kata, the concubine of Tokugawa Ieyasu, and she was the first female actually to go up on Mount Shijimen. This
mm,
is why there's a certain narrative, because she was a very powerful woman. She had a great charisma. She was a great supporter of Nichiren's cause, and so in a way she embodies, because she's also a historical person, but on the other hand, she has a kind of this legendary powers ascribed to her, because of course she gave, of course, she had many children, and she tonsured herself. She established many temples. So this legend of so the legend of of Shichimen in the Nichiren context is that in the Kenji period, so I think in 1277, Nichiren was at Minobu. He was um, holding a sermon in the open, and then within the audience there was a beautiful young lady who didn't say anything, but everybody was suspicious of her. And then at a certain point, Nichiren told told her, "Show your true appearance," and then she basically transformed into this great dragon. And then there are many other narrative. Maybe there are some icon in some iconographical depiction. There's Nichiren preaching, and then there is a sort of vase, a flower vase with a dragon spoon around the vase. This is the dragon that I mean. There's also another of those vases. For example, it was at Taisekiji. It's still at the museum, and they said this was one of the religious object used by Nietzsche when he prayed for rain, etc., etc. But this was in until the 70s. I don't think that. Because this is very obviously an Edo period artifact, but just as in many situations which ukiyo-e or painting which depict Nietzsche. As a matter of fact, this vase with this dragon's coiled around the vase is present. You can observe it in many situations. So this Shichimen, which also appears then in the Edo period on mandalas of the in the Kuonji tradition, but not only, but mainly, you can see how the power of women, and she's in a certain way has iconographized into Shichimen Daimyoji, into the nymph Shichimen, and then she even found a place on the mandala.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. The second question from John Hughes is regarding Nichiren's belief that he was the reincarnation of Jogyo Bodhisattva. Mr. Finocchiaro mentioned in the last session that Nichiren added a note saying he was Jogyo to a mandala Gohonzon. Was this common or rare? In Nichiren's authenticated works, I've only found only one place, Sandai Hiho Honjoji, the transmission of the three great secret dharmas, where he states outright that he is Jogyo. And then more often, he suggests he is an avatar or forerunner. For example, on Honzon Mando show, where he says, I, Nichiren, am not as great a man as these bodhisattvas, yet I have roughly understood it. So, yeah, so the question again is, was it common or rare for Nichiren to make a connection between himself and Jogyo on the mandalas?
In this case, it was in the same. We have only one specimen extant. This is the mandala number 16, also from the catalog, also known as the Mannen Kyugo Daihonzon. But this, of course, those names were given much later. This is a Honzon where he. I mean, he didn't write specifically, I am Jogyo, but of course, he wrote this laudatory note where he says, Bodhisattva Jogyo appears in this world and widely propagate this mandala, etc., etc. So it is not explicit where he says, I am Jogyo also. It is a sort of also in other writings, he never says, I am the reincarnation. The term reincarnation is definitely not correct. He felt in a way that he was carry on the work of Jogyo Bodhisattva, and in which way, I mean, we have no way to be in his head. We can only see by his actions. So there are some hints. He also, we talked also last time, I think, that he asks himself a question and he gives himself an answer when he says, who else has lived with his life the verse of 23 characters, who will be persecuted by swords and stave and exiled repeatedly, etc., etc. So if I am not, tell me who else it is. But in his point is this, the gyoja, so the practitioners, the one who practices the Lotus Sutra as literally, and so then he doesn't really make a distinction between Jogyo, the avatar, and the gyoja. He just say, I do my best to be the gyoja, and then he doesn't specify, in my educated humble guess, purportedly not very cut clear. So to give it a, because let's face it, Nichiren knew that every person is different, and that every person needs a different stimuli to arrive to the same goal. So maybe, and please let me say for the third time, maybe he left it open to each one interpretation, because somebody needed to revere the great saint as the incarnation of Bodhisattva Jogo. If this narrative fits his or her needs, others are more rational. So of course, as a scholar, as somebody who studied, I cannot go into this reincarnation narrative. Of course, I can only say what is, how you normally read the scripts in a in the way that in an academic way. The simple answer anyway is yes, it is very rare. In fact, we have only one mandala where he identifies himself with Vishishta Karita, so Jogyo Bosatsu. And also you have to consider that not all the Nichiren writings are extant in his own handwriting, and even those who are on the catalog authentic in his handwriting, you have to go even one step further in checking how much of this authentic is authentic, because of course, no, in the sense we know that when a new temple was opened, they needed a relic. So if I say, let's say I have a Nichiren writing of 3 sheets, I say, okay, dear Reverend, I give you 1 sheet, I keep the other one, but we copy the text, of course.
Yeah.
You know,
And then they
so
might
you
add
have one or the,
something.
and then it goes into. We know, of course, that there are relics which are just one line of text.
Yeah.
So how many times the text has been copied in order to divide the original holograph, and we cannot say that there is some interpolation among the text, willingly or erroneously.
Right.
We don't know. So maybe, as a matter of fact, the Sanda Hiho, the three great secret dharmas, is one of those disputed writings. I recommend to maybe because it's available online. Uh, is some issues about Nietzsche's writings is from Sueki Fumihiro, and also please read Jacqueline Stone PhD thesis. Is all
Yeah.
on the on this subject.
Yeah. And her dissertation is available from her
Yeah,
website.
for example, yeah, for
That's
example, yeah.
that's the one to read, really. Um, as far as I know, in Nichiren Shu, I don't know what words they use in Japanese, but whenever I hear the Japanese priests or people talk about it, they always say the appearance of Jogyo. Nichiren was the appearance of Jogyo Bodhisattva. They don't use the word reincarnation, and that would also
Oh,
make
of
sense
course,
from
of
a
course, yeah. Of
right,
course, of
because
course.
from a doctrinal point of view, an advanced bodhisattva does not reincarnate or take rebirth, but they emanate, right? They emanate forms into all the worlds that need bodhisattva activity. So yeah, yeah. I guess one final question then, and then we have to bring this to a close. Let
Yeah, and
me.
then I have to go to bed because it's 3 it's 3:15 in the night.
Right. I'm curious. Do you see this mandala here that I'm sharing?
Yes, yes, yeah,
Have you ever seen this one before? This is one of it's bought from a Butsugu store.
yeah.
I wonder if that is a copy of one of Nichiren's mandalas or it's just
Oh,
some random
absolutely,
priest calligraphy.
absolutely not. This is I've seen it as the same as you in the Busugu shops. This is uh, a calligraphic reproduction of an idea Nichiren Mandala. This is in a way in for some people for some devotees, the fact that uh, the copy of an original Nichiren mandala is not really that important in a way. So this is a icon. The mandala is an icon. So this is an icon reproduced on this in this mandalic form. So this is you see it. It has all the four heavenly kings. It has Fudo and Aizen. It has Nichiren signature. It has all the elongated komyo lines, all the bodhisattvas. Everything is in there. So this is basically a calligraphic rendering. Is it? It is as if someone asked, show me a depiction of Maria or of Jesus on the cross, and tells me, how do you think that this is doctrinally correct or something like that? No, this has nothing to do with it. Of course, you have the Christ and the Madonna of Michelangelo, of Leonardo da Vinci, of an infinite number of great painters. And then you have the religious item shop, which says, okay, I need also to do my own image, and then I'll ask some calligrapher or some painter to do it. And this is exactly the same thing. This is a very basically, there is not much. I mean, the difference is seen only from, of course, us that we studied the Nichiren Mandala. We can say that immediately, but basically, to the everyday person, this is a perfectly legitimate, if you want, Nichiren Mandala, because everything which needs to be inscribed on there is there. Of course, uh, someone who comes from a certain, originally from a certain narrative, where this original, true, false, narrative is very strong, of course would say, oh my god, this mandala, why? But this is something, this is for many many people, this is perfectly normal, because the mandala, the calligraphic mandala icon transcends even this concept of being true and false and etc etc. Of course, you have to understand that, uh, uh, also the Nichiren Mandala has copyright issues, or other situations. This is not something that you can say, okay, I'll take a picture from the Gohonzon shoe, and then I'll make millions of copies, and make a profit of it. I mean, I don't think that nobody is gonna bring you in court for something like that. But if you get my point, of
Yeah.
course, a legitimate religious item shop say, okay, let's play it safe, and then we do it that day. And this is perfectly legitimate, because those scrolls have been around for decades, and I think they're even produced in China, which means on a large scale. So somebody must have used them, and I don't. I've never heard about incidents and people being, how can I say, eaten alive in the Avicii hell for using it. No, it's, because we have to say things as they are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. So in short, it's a rendering of a abstractly idealized nature.
Exactly, exactly.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Let me end that sharing. Well, I know you need to go to bed, and I
Yeah.
need to get the